you were redacting it. But I'll tell you why it's clear it wasn't a mistake. There is an email entitled Epstein Victim List. There are 32 names. 1 is redacted, 31 are not. So someone looked at it and decided to redact something. And I will tell you that that is clearly intentional to intimidate these survivors and victims. Now, in an interview last week—
How will you tell me that's intentional?
In an interview last week, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche—
You can't go off script.
—said that any victim that wants to speak with the department has done so, hopefully. Well, thanks to the incredibly brave people sitting here behind you, we can actually ask them if that's true. Now, would the survivors and victims who are here please stand up one more time? Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those all of you who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them. And despite the shameful and despicable efforts by Ms. Bondi and her department to intimidate you, how many of you are still willing to speak to the Department of Justice? All of them. Well, Ms. Bondi—
This hearing didn't just get tense, it turned into a full-blown credibility collapse in real time. What you're about to watch is a sequence where one line of questioning keeps tightening, and the answers coming back, they don't land. They don't clarify, and at a certain point, they start making things worse. Because this isn't just about documents. It's about what was withheld, what was exposed, and who ends up looking like they're protecting the wrong people. Dan Goldman walks in with something very specific. Not broad accusations, not vague claims, documents, emails, redactions. And he's not guessing. He's telling you exactly what he saw, what was missing, and what doesn't add up. And right away, you can feel the direction this is going. He's not fishing, he's building a case step by step. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of clean answers, instead of direct engagement, the response starts drifting. Deflection, dismissal, even a personal jab. And that's when the tone of the entire exchange shifts. Because once it turns personal, once the substance gets sidestepped, the momentum flips. Watch closely how quickly this goes from a document dispute to a control problem. And once that shift happens, Goldman doesn't ease off, he leans in harder. Pay attention to how each unanswered question stacks on the last one. This is where the pressure starts building.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I went over to the department yesterday for a couple of hours to review some of the unredacted materials. And I am looking forward to your detailed explanation for why you have withheld almost half of the documents, which is required by the bill. Now, obviously, there are 3 million documents, so I didn't get through much. But one thing I didn't see was the client list that you said you had on your desk a year ago. I did, however, find a couple of important documents. An 86-page prosecution memo from the Southern District of New York and a draft indictment from Florida against Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators. For reasons that I cannot understand nor are permitted by the bill, they were still redacted, even for members of Congress. So, Ms. Bondi, will you commit right here to immediately providing those 2 documents in unredacted form to members of Congress? Not a complicated question.
Well, I guess it is for you because you have a law degree and those are privileged.
Okay, they're not privileged, but we will discuss that later. I also found an email that I have right here from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell that was unredacted. and it included notes of statements that Donald Trump made about his prior relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there is no reason for this to be hidden from the American people. There is no privilege, there is no attorney-client privilege, and I see you're checking with your staff, and I can assure you, staff, this is not under attorney-client privilege because it was sent from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. Will you commit to publicly providing the unredacted version of this so that the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
You're about as good of a lawyer today as you were when you tried to impeach President Trump in 2016. Have you apologized for that in 2019?
So will you unredact this? Will you
were
unredact
lead
this?
counsel on that. Privileged.
I'm asking you, will you unredact this?
Privileged.
Privileged, of course. I look forward to discussing this more. Now, these are obviously improper redactions.
Well, and let me stop for a minute.
Right there, that's the opening phase of the squeeze. Goldman isn't just asking for documents. He's pointing out something very specific. He went in, reviewed materials himself, and what he didn't find matters just as much as what he did. No client list. Key documents still redacted. And not just minor details, major prosecution materials and draft indictments. So when he asks, will you commit to providing them unredacted? That's not rhetorical. That's a direct test. And look at the response. Instead of a clean yes or no, we get a pivot into privileged. But Goldman immediately pushes back. They're not privileged. That moment right there, that's friction. Two completely different interpretations, and neither side backing down. Then comes the escalation. Goldman introduces something even more sensitive, an email involving Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell referencing statements from Donald Trump. Now the stakes jump. Because now we're not just talking about procedural redactions, we're talking about information that could shape public understanding of a high-profile relationship. And again, he asks directly, will you release it? But instead of engaging the substance, the response goes personal. That line, questioning Goldman's credibility as a lawyer, that's not an answer. That's a redirect. And here's why that matters. When a hearing moves from facts to personal attacks, it usually means one side is trying to break the rhythm of questioning. But Goldman doesn't take the bait. He pulls it right back. Will you unredact this? Again. Direct, focused. And at this point, you can see the dynamic shifting. Bondi isn't controlling the exchange anymore. She's reacting to it. Even when she leans on privilege again, Goldman is already ahead of it. He's explaining why it doesn't apply, even calling out staff in real time. That's not just questioning, that's preempting the defense. And then comes one of the most telling moments. He flat out says these are improper redactions to protect Donald Trump and others. That's the accusation. It's no longer implied, it's stated. And instead of diffusing it, the exchange gets more chaotic. Interruptions. Talking over each other. The chair stepping in. That's when you know the structure is breaking down. Because once the format starts slipping, whoever has the clearer narrative usually gains ground, and Goldman is building one, piece by piece. But what comes next? This is where it goes from intense to explosive. Because now he shifts from documents to people. And this is the moment everything changes.
Let me stop for a minute.
I'm talking.
If they're not privileged,
quiet.
Don't yell at me. If they're not
Mr. Chairman, would you stop the clock? This is on your time. It's not on Mr. Goldman.
If they're not privileged,
you used your improper redaction.
You'll like my answer.
To
if we
continue
review them
to
and they're not
protect
privileged,
Donald
Time belongs to the
we will
member.
be happy to release them.
We'll stop the clock. We'll stop the clock. Time belongs to the member. Go ahead.
Even though you used improper redactions to protect Donald Trump and other predators associated with Jeffrey Epstein, you did the exact opposite thing with the survivors and victims of this scheme. So their identification information was really the only thing required to be redacted, and it was not. And it's clear this was not a mistake. This was not by accident. This was not because you only had 30 days when you really used 75, and that doesn't even include all the hours last March that you were redacting it. But I'll tell you why it's clear it wasn't a mistake. There is an email entitled Epstein Victim List. There are 32 names. 1 is redacted, 31 are not. So someone looked at it and decided to redact something. And I will tell you that that is clearly intentional to intimidate these survivors and victims. Now, in an interview last week...
How will you tell me that's intentional?
In an interview last week, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche...
You can't go off script.
...said that any victim that wants to speak with the department has done so, hopefully. Well, thanks to the incredibly brave people sitting here behind you, we can actually ask them if that's true. Now, would the survivors and victims who are here please stand up one more time? Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those of you, all of you, who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them. And despite the shameful and despicable efforts by Ms. Bondi and her department to intimidate you, how many of you are still willing to speak to the Department of Justice? All of them. Well, Ms. Bondi, it looks like you have some more witnesses
Gentleman's
to
time
talk
has expired.
And I yield back.
We will go to the good gentleman from North Carolina, Congressman Knott.
Thank
May
you.
I have a moment, Congressman?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Here we go. Here's the photograph. This is why he wanted to repeat everything that had been said previously on Epstein. This is his state, New York. You probably don't even know who this is. Wahid Mohammed from Afghanistan.
Yes, because I'm no longer a prosecutor.
Convicted of assault. Wow, he represents New York. Wow, yet he doesn't care about the illegal aliens convicted of crimes. Assault and homicide. No longer a prosecutor, so he doesn't care about his constituents. Here we go. Arson, El Salvador, Miguel Palacios. Fermin Flores Ramales, Mexico, rape.
Let's talk about the 70%.
This right here, this is the turning point. Up until now, the argument has been about documents, privilege, redactions, technical, legal terrain. But Goldman changes the battlefield. He moves to victims. And suddenly, this isn't abstract anymore. He points out something incredibly specific, that identifying information for victims, which should have been protected, wasn't properly redacted. And then he backs it up with an example, a list of 32 names with only 1 redacted. That's not random. That's intentional selection. And he says it plainly, this was not a mistake. That's a serious claim. Because now, the narrative flips completely. Instead of protecting sensitive information, the accusation is that the department protected powerful figures while exposing victims. That contrast hits hard. And then he does something you almost never see executed this cleanly in a hearing. He brings the room into it. He turns to the survivors sitting behind Bondi and asks direct questions. How many of you have met with the Department of Justice? None. How many of you reached out? All of them. How many were ignored? All of them. That sequence right there? That's devastating. Because it's not just him making the claim anymore, it's being reinforced in real time by the people affected. And there's no interruption that can undo that moment. No legal framing can spin that visual. This is where the narrative completely shifts. Because now the question isn't just about redactions, it's about credibility. It's about whether the department is doing what it says it's doing. And Goldman closes it with a line that lands. It looks like you have some more witnesses to talk to. That's not just a jab. That's a summary of everything he just exposed. And from this point on, Bondi doesn't recover the exchange. Instead, what we get is a pivot, a sudden shift away from Epstein, away from the documents, away from the victims, and into a completely different topic. Photos. Immigration. Criminal cases. This is the moment where the conversation breaks. Because instead of addressing what just happened, the response changes the subject entirely. And that tells you everything about how the exchange ended. Goldman drove the conversation into a corner, and instead of answering the pressure, the response moved somewhere else entirely. That's not regaining control. That's exiting the argument. And when you look at the full sequence, from document questions to privilege disputes to victim testimony, the trajectory is clear. Goldman escalated methodically. Bondi resisted, deflected, and then pivoted. And by the end of it, the focus wasn't on what was hidden anymore. It was on what was revealed in that room. That's why this moment sticks. Not because of one line, but because of how the pressure built and where it landed. If you want more breakdowns like this where powerful people get pressed on the record, hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Who do you think came out stronger in this hearing? And what was the one moment that changed the whole exchange?